Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Roll the Dice with Dave. I'm your host, Dave Rivera, coming to you live from St. Augustine, Florida. I almost feel kind of bad because I know parts of this country are dealing with some really cold weather, and we're at about 80 degrees today. It's a great beach day, great boat day. Before we get started, I would like to remind everybody that tonight's recording is pre-recorded, but if you make any comments or post any questions, I'll be sure to get them to our guest at a later time, and she will be able to reply to your comments or be able to answer your questions. Also, before we get started, I would like to remind everybody that we are available on YouTube and Facebook. Roll the Dice with Dave. Please go out and like, share, and subscribe. So this way you can share this information with those who want to be the positive change that they want to see in this world. So without any further hesitation, I am actually looking forward to speaking with this guest. I feel like it's been about 3 months in the making to get our schedules all worked out. Without any further hesitation, I would love to bring up my guest, Chelsey Leffet. And I probably said your name wrong again, like I used to back in the day.
It's Leffet, Chelsey Leffet.
Leffet.
That's okay.
And I knew I was going to
Takes
say
you
it
back.
because I always used to say Leffet too. And I think you always corrected me back in the day. How you doing, Chelsey? It's good to see you.
Well, thanks for having me.
So if you don't mind just giving us a brief introduction on who you are, maybe talk a little about how we met, since I kind of gave it away that I met you in college, but just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, it's funny because you always say you're either Rivera or Dave or whomever, but you'll always be Dr. Rivera. Having gone to East Carolina University, you were some of the intro class, and you were great. I mean, the intro classes at the hospitality management school and everything that I went to school for at ECU was just fantastic having you as my professor. I was there from 2008 to 2012, and then I actually continued on part-time online with my master's through ECU too. And I studied hospitality management. I thought I just loved the hospitality industry and everything like that, just given trips that I've taken in my life and with family, and wanted to obviously make a career out of it, which I have, which I know is kind of few and far between, I feel like, with a lot of people who go to school, and rightfully so. I mean, people who try and think they know what they want, and then they leave and figure out that a different path is right for them. But I actually stayed in the hotel world and in the finance and investment world. So it's been good. It's been good.
Well, you were kind of like a hospitality unicorn from that standpoint, and that a lot of the hospitality students go into, front office, special events, and do those kinds of things. You went into really the accounting and finance, and you don't find a lot of hospitality students going, "Hey, I want to go into the accounting and finance piece."
Totally. I had like a mental breakdown, I think, my junior into senior year of like, what am I doing? These internships. I loved the industry, but at the end of the summer or the end of the internship, I was kind of just like, okay, that was done. Now what's next? So I knew I didn't want to be in the operations space, but I knew I loved the industry. So I had to kind of like find the niche and figure out what could work. And the investment side of it was it.
Here's what's crazy. So you were there from 08 to 12. So you've been graduated 10 years. That's crazy because when I look at you, you still look exactly the same. But I know, but I want to say I'm probably looking at, like, I got gray hair in my beard. I actually have a beard. I think I was always.
You're the same too. I appreciate that, but yeah,
you look exactly the same. It's almost surreal because when you said that, it almost took me back. Right, it almost took me back to the intro classes and all the stuff that I used to do at ECU.
It's crazy. I hire people now, and when they talk about like people being their age, I think I'm part of their group too. I'm like, oh yeah, our age people. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm like 10 years older than you.
Well, I'm going through that now because a lot of the students here at Flagler College, where now I'm the director of the hospitality program and the chair of business. When I'm in class and they're talking and they go, "That's something my dad would say," and I go, "Well, I'm old enough to be your dad, and I have a daughter who's about to graduate from college, right?" So I was like, "Yes," and I have a son who's also a freshman in college, right? So
which is crazy because when I knew you, I mean, I still know you, but when I knew you back then, they were just kids.
Well, here's the thing, yeah. So you got there. My son Pablo was barely 3 years old. My daughter Sophia was probably a year old. At that point. Sadie was 8 years old. Diego was like 6.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's crazy to think now the
They're
arc.
adults.
Yeah, and I've talked to some people that were in the class when I first brought Sophia in, right after she was born. So she was born in August, and then 2 weeks later, I was like, "Hey, here's my newest daughter," and took her into class. And then they see her on my socials, and they go, "Where's the baby?" And I'm like, so "That's the baby.
Yes,
Is
that's
she's a
her.
freshman in high school now, right?" So it's a
Crazy.
crazy thing, man. I can't believe it's been 10 years. That's
Yeah.
awesome though. It sounds like you've had
Yeah.
a good journey. So I want to jump into this next little piece, and it's really kind of, I call the review and HTM highlights and in your opinion, but it's kind of looking at just some things in the world. So over these last couple of years, the world has just been crazy with COVID shutdowns and all that stuff. But I feel a lot of people have found things that they go, "Hey, man, this is pretty cool," or "This is different." Has there anything that's happened over the last couple of years that you go, "Hey, somebody should check out this book, somebody should check out this podcast, or somebody should go to this place, somebody should try this new way of doing things"? Did anything like that happen to you over the last couple of years?
Sure. Yeah. I think.
I guess the COVID era, as we'll call
Yeah.
it.
Right. At least with like the pandemic, I've always been very big into like self-development books or self-help books and kind of figuring out how I tick as well as thinking about how others tick. And I think during the quarantining phase of COVID, at least I kind of looked at that as, although I know everyone was suffering in their own way and it wasn't necessarily the brightest time, I looked at that as kind of like a restart of like, okay, let me redirect my passions, or let me make sure that I'm giving enough of myself to my health or to my physical well-being, or obviously my mental well-being had to stay on top. So I really dove into that time as like a new beginning, focusing on more of those books, making sure that I was allocating enough time to getting outside. I mean, even just, getting some sunlight and sitting out back, and reading and really diving into that sort of thing kind of helped me through that time, I think, and connecting. I mean, we all did the webinar with your aunt third removed or
Yeah,
something to reconnect, and you haven't.
yeah, that's right.
But no, it was an interesting time, and I think at least for me being in DC, I mean, I can't even explain the amount of change that has occurred for me personally, as well as for the city and everyone living in it, of what we experienced over the past 3 years, I would say. From from Trump being in office to the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests that are, literally blocks from where I live and things like that, the insurrection, the law that's being made, the first woman vice president, things like that. I mean, like, it ran the gamut here. The way that we approach the vaccination and the mask mandating and the restrictions and travel. Obviously, DC is a huge international as well as domestic travel hub for history buffs and politics and all of that. So, like, seeing how our world kind of turned upside down definitely gave me some perspective, a little bit in each of those categories throughout the past couple of years.
No,
Yeah.
that's cool, and I'm glad you mentioned the first woman VP, because a lot of what we're talking about today revolves around Women's History Month and the idea of the International Women's Day, which we'll get into just a second. But I want to touch on this next little piece before we go. Um, Being in Florida, I'm not gonna lie, right? So I hear people talk about, man, we can't do anything in other places. There's still these mask mandates shut down, and Florida kind of said to hell with all that and was open almost 2 months after the shutdown period. So I still remember the day I got the email on Thursday, March 12th, 2020, like, "Hey, spring break is next week. We're not going to come back. Nobody come to work tomorrow. We're starting tomorrow, and it'll be 2 weeks and we'll be back to normal." So I still have that email printed out and kind of stuck to my desk, because I remember
Yeah.
the next day my kids and I went down to Universal Studios. We were like, "Ooh, free day." And then like everything shut down, like everything just stopped. But then 2 months later, Florida was like, "Yeah, we're opening things." Have What's it like from a hospitality and tourism standpoint? Have you been going places, doing things? What's DC still feeling like?
Yeah.
Because I feel I'm in a silo in the state of Florida. Our governor is just a little different. He yelled at kids, telling them to take off their mask. Right? It was just such a different
Yeah.
landscape
Yeah.
of things, and I feel insulated from the rest of the world hearing some of the things going on.
Yeah.
What have you
And I
noticed?
think
That's one
other
thing.
places too have felt insulated in our own regard, right? Like I remember the first time I went to Southern Virginia and I was like, no one has a mask on here. What? Because all I was living was DC world where we all, I mean, even to this day, I walk around, I mean, it's cold out. So a mask is kind of nice. It's
Kind
like
of
your
nice.
little face scarf, but um, everyone wore masks, everyone continued. And we went through 2 waves of mask mandates where they were removed and then they were brought back. So it was always this kind of just like, let's wear them. It's going to be fine. It's no big deal sort of thing.
Have you done any traveling or anything? Or
Yeah. So with work, at least, so I should say too. So I live and work in DC. Well, sorry, I moved actually to Virginia. So now I'm a Virginia resident, but I work in DC. That's important here in the district. You have to make sure that
I'm
you
about to say, I know how they are in the district, man. That they like, do you live in DC or do you live
exactly,
in the outskirts? Are you from Maryland or yeah, no, I know how that
exactly.
goes.
But with what I do hotel consulting and appraisal work, so market studies, valuations, feasibility studies, and largely I would drive places. Um, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, DC is kind of like my territory, so to speak. But when I was driving places, you could totally tell the difference between, for work at least, between the different jurisdictions and the restrictions surrounding them. I personally, I mean, I'm a proponent of our industry, and for me to sit on my couch and not travel seemed kind of wrong when all these hotels are suffering. And, I'm looking at the numbers on a day to day, just watching these assets crumble under
Yeah.
expenses and no one in their hotels. So I absolutely went back to traveling as soon as I could. Obviously, with restrictions like internationally or things with the testing and whatnot, it's always a little more challenging, or who's even letting people in and things like that. But yeah, I've taken quite a few plane trips. We actually, our company, we had our annual summit back in January where we had probably 100, 150 people gathered out in Denver. So we flew for that. It's been
Oh
pretty,
wow.
for me, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to do it at some point. And as long as we're being safe and like we all wore masks and made sure, to do the best as we can to socially distance. But at this point, traveling to me seems pretty normal and back to normal. The numbers for the hotels certainly don't speak that language, at least in the district or the surrounding area. There's certain markets that have really rebounded because you can tell people are out and traveling, but there's other markets that just aren't there and still are lacking and need a lot of rebounding time.
Well, it's crazy because I was just doing some analytics with our Convention Visitors Bureau, and we were looking at numbers. And
from your calendar.
oh my gosh, sorry. I say that's like the life that we're in now. Like I have all this tech everywhere that keeps me in check. Alexa, off. So yeah, it's a crazy thing. Like all this tech everywhere. But I was looking at the numbers, and some places were comparing to, the end of 2020. We actually were doing comparisons of 2021 to 2019, which was record breaking here in Florida, and we're beating those numbers.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at 2022. We're almost through our first quarter, but we're kind of looking at our trends compared to 2021 at this time, and
yeah, it's your
we're beating those numbers. So when people talk about Florida, it's crazy, the inflow of people that are coming. And being in St. Augustine, usually there's a little bit of a downtime right after Christmas and the beginning of the year. We really had none. This weekend, they're still running the park and rides. They're like, we don't want to congest things up. We have new hotels going up because we still have a deficit of room nights for the demand that's coming in. It is insane in this area right now. And I would have never expected that coming off of a pandemic, but people are coming to Florida. They're still coming in droves.
Certainly. And here we're just kind of hoping companies bring back their associates into office and things like that. I work downtown and it's definitely more quiet than even now today, March 2022, basically 2 years post the actual shutdown of things, and it's still not back to normal.
I know that's just insane. So, this last little piece before we get into talking about the main topic of International Women's Day and Women's History Month, kind of an in your opinion thing. So, I'm going to ask you this: when do you think everything will kind of go back to a normal feeling where people are not wearing masks? And the only reason I asked this is because I was asked in my class the other day, and I said 2024, right? I just threw out, but now that I think about it, I was like, it probably will be 2024 when you think about
Yeah.
it. And but I think it'll be, well, this is kind of the way things are going to be normal. Hey, you're going to have flu vaccines, and you're going to have some kind of other vaccine to deal maybe with COVID. May even see people masking up during peak kind of sickness seasons.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, when do you think things will go back to a quote unquote as much as normal as it will be?
Yeah, I think definitely we'll kind of get back to normal. I mean, when you look at least 9/11, right? Like people at that point said that they would never get on a plane again. Like never. And we're totally past that. Like we've forgotten it. I mean, we're resilient and we adjust, we adapt, and we'll I don't want to say we'll forget because it's huge, right? The pandemic and all that's occurred, but I would say 2024, 25. Obviously there's certain markets like Florida who maybe 22, 23.
Yeah, no, I definitely say 22 in Florida.
But
We're kind of back
yeah,
to
their
normal almost
markets
already.
certainly. Yeah. Yeah.
No, cool. Thank you so much for that. So I'm excited to talk to you about International Women's Day, which is going to be coming up, Women's History Month. So the first question that I have for you revolving around this topic is, why do you think it's so important that we continue to talk about and address women's issues?
Yeah. I mean, with any issue, right? It's just if you don't talk about it, nothing changes, right? And I think we've all realized that, especially with all the things that have gone on, kind of how we alluded to earlier in the past 2 years of with the Black Lives Matter and things around just either racism or unbiased or biased opinions or subconscious things that go on. Um, I think it's so important to speak on those topics because if no one speaks about them, then no one really gets heard and no change is made. And especially in the world of like women in career and things like that, there's just so many inequalities and so much improvement that has to be made for women to be considered like on the same playing field as men. And if we aren't speaking about it, I mean, sure, every day or every month, like there's a hot dog day for crying out loud, things like that. But this kind of thing is different, right? These are times to celebrate and show the world the importance of these sorts of people and groups of people and the contributions they've made and continue to make. And it's just so important for that. And now we're living in this society where everything's on your fingertips or at your fingertips on your phone, and you reach a lot more people. So right now, I think it's even more important to spread the word and to speak out and all of that.
Um, just kind of a little segue question. Who would you consider maybe your biggest woman role model? Who do you look at and go, oh, yeah, that is somebody I would maybe not be, but I would
Yeah,
like to kind of emulate maybe their career path, their
sure.
trajectory?
It's funny you ask this because I've certainly in moments of my life tried to like pin down someone who, if I had to be anyone or if I had to have someone that I admired in every aspect of their life or career, like who would it be? And I can never find an answer, but I think that's a little bit part of just like who I am and that I'm always searching for improvement or searching for something better or things like this. But obviously, I mean, I think a lot of us who have parents or are privileged enough to have a mom that you grew up with in your home and is showing you every day like how to be a good person and things like that. Your mother always kind of takes that, or a father figure too. I mean, it's not just doesn't have to be a woman really. It could be a man who just sticks up for women's rights and stuff like that could be admired. From a career standpoint, I thankfully I've honestly been really fortunate that the company I've worked for since leaving college has a lot of really awesome, tenured, experienced, expert women at the tops of the firm. I mean, within my team just here in the Northeast, we're 50% women. Our firm, like, honestly, some of the top people are able to manage their lives, career, personal, family, everything. And they're really admirable. And so I've been really lucky to have those sorts of women on my day-to-day basis, not someone that I see through a TV or not someone that I just kind of watch from afar, but people that I can look up to locally, kind of, or at least through the computer screen.
No, that's pretty. So are you guys still remote? Are you guys still doing
Yeah, we're still remote. We have like 35 offices throughout the US. So, and some of the offices might have 10 people, some might have 2. But
okay.
We've always been very computer based in our collaboration and things like that. So
that probably helped, right? You didn't miss much of a beat. I worked with a lot of people. They were like, "What's this Zoom thing that we need to do?"
Yeah.
there was a lot of those questions. So no, that's good. What do you think are the most pressing issues facing women today? And I mean, you don't have to give an exhaustive list, but maybe if you think one or two things, what comes to mind do you think are the biggest issues facing women today? Just in a regular, maybe everyday type of situation.
There's obviously huge issues, like just how I mentioned the inequities in pay or privileges, or how we treat or I should say, like, how the government treats women in terms of our bodies and things like that. And that's like a whole nother rabbit hole that we could talk about, but from like a day-to-day thing, because we can only do so much and we only have so many hours. And I think that there's a lot of just every minute of everyday things that women face, from the way people talk about women or the way people talk to women, the sexual aspect of things, or the inappropriate banter, and I shouldn't even call it banter. See, I'm like a subject. It's not banter. Like, it's inappropriate.
Yeah, no.
You know, it's hard. Like, even I give an example. And again, like, I'm always learning, and we have to be open to like asking why and why we think this way. And everyone does, men, women, everyone alike. But staying curious and being adaptable, because like just the other day, I was looking at a resume and it was a woman. Her resume was like kick ass, like so great. And I'm sitting here thinking, you know, like, oh, this would be great. Like, she'd be great here. She could do all these things. She'll be awesome for our team. And on her resume, she had put that she was a single mother. So that alone to me was really cool, because she like had enough pride and enough like self-awareness and self-empowerment that she felt comfortable putting that, because a lot of people wouldn't, you know what I mean? A lot of people would assume that someone might think weirdly about that, or that she would be limited. And I swear to you, I did go down that path for a moment of like, okay, well, if she's a single mom, will she be able to travel as much as I would be able to travel? Or would she be able to handle all the work? Or will she be open to this? Or could she move to this place? And I had to kind of like check myself and be like, what the hell, Chelsey? Like, I am a woman and I can manage it all. Who am I to think that this woman cannot? But I think it's this like unconscious or subconscious bias that we've just grown up in, that we kind of put these gender roles or like stereotypes onto people that are flawed, quite frankly, and that we need to have the self-awareness to say like, okay, that was not right of me, and she's probably still as kick-ass as her resume says.
As her resume says. No, it's funny you say that, because I sit on the Diversity Strategic Planning Committee at Flagler College, but I was talking with some people about what we can do to try and maybe level the playing field. And I said, well, when HR gets all the CVs, I was like, why don't they just remove the names?
Yeah.
I was like, they should just remove the names. And when we get them as faculty, we're just reviewing credentials, and then we rank the credentials. And after we finish ranking the credentials, there's maybe a QR code that's associated with the CV, that when we send it back to HR, they could tie the name to it eventually and say, hey, these are the people. I said, I just have a feeling that our selection process may be a lot different as far as the candidates we're bringing if we remove the names.
Which, isn't that so crazy? But at the same time, we're all human, right? Like, we all we can't knock it unless we like really dive deep into it. And a lot of people aren't willing to dive deep into their subconscious problems, whether it be their own or their outward ones. But yeah, no, that's totally true. And even like from recruiting standpoints too, like there's certain companies we always have been known to recruit at Cornell. And if you look at the demographics of Cornell, it's a great hospitality school, great hotel investment school, real estate, everything. But there are so many other schools too that maybe have a more diverse background or a more diverse student body that we should be tapping into just the same as how we always tapped into them for the last 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that's a great idea to kind of remove any bias and just look at the facts.
Because I think a lot of times you'll get a lot of,
yeah.
Right. If you do the comparison. And it's true, you mentioned Cornell and their hospitality program. I always tell people that their hospitality program there is almost like the B school at a lot of other places with all the stuff they do. One of the things that I'm not gonna lie, that deterred me is I didn't want to go that far up, right? Snow, cold.
Yeah, it's very cold there.
Yeah, I went to school in South Carolina. Now I live in Florida, which is completely
I did the same thing.
I was up in New York, right?
I didn't tour a single school north of Delaware where I grew up. I was like, no, we're going south. We're going warmer.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the way I am. As far as you had mentioned something regarding equality, right? So I'm going to go ahead and ask this question, and I know it's going to be a hard question to address when it comes to women's history and International Women's Day, but do you ever think we will reach a point where women will be put on the same level as men in the workplace, where there won't be a question of pay inequity? There won't be a question about some of the things you mentioned of are they sacrificing career for home life and those kinds of things. Do you think we'll ever reach that point? Or do you think it's always going to be one of those things that sits in the back of people's mind and that women will always have that uphill battle?
Well, if we assume that it's always going to be that way, then it definitely will. So I think first the main thing is all of us agreeing that it shouldn't be that way and that it won't, and we'll make it not be that way. If you're asking me if I think I'll be alive when it happens, the answer is no.
Okay.
If I think it will happen, absolutely. I do. I honestly do. I don't think I'll be alive. I think that, I try and read up on this stuff too of how you can help or how you can get involved or all of that. And I think that there was one publication I read that said it was like 150 years or maybe it was like 160 or something, but that's a long time, right? Like I won't be around to see it. But at the same time, there are certain things that either can speed the trajectory or kind of lessen the upward trend of the trajectory. And I think that COVID certainly lessened that trend. I think that the stress of managing for men and women, but obviously with the stereotypes and gender roles that society puts on women as of current, the stress around COVID and raising a family. I'm single and without kids, but I can't imagine having, 3 to even one, half of a child even at home while I was trying to work. It'd be really hard. And those stresses of the pandemic and all of that are really, really putting us back, I think, in the standpoint of what equal is and the roles that either family dynamic, work dynamic, anything social dynamic play for when equality happens. But I do think that days like today are important for us to talk about it in order for us to keep the momentum going and to keep people informed and to keep people, thinking like, oh, well, maybe I should get involved in that women's group, or maybe I should get involved in the school, because a lot of it is going to be up to our kids, right? If we're looking at 160 years out, we better be raising some pretty unbiased children in order to get this done. So it's really like an everyday battle in order to get to that point.
I tell you what, maybe that's why I appreciated you so much when we were at ECU, because you're a lot more optimistic than I am, right? I have daughters, and I want my daughters to be put on a level playing field and have the same
Yeah,
opportunities as anybody else. But in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there going, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't.
right.
I feel pretty secure it's not going to happen in my lifetime. I really
Yeah,
do. Um, and I just have a serious doubt that it ever will. And I know that's such a pessimistic viewpoint, but I'm just always like, oh God, there's always going to be something, right? There's always going
yeah,
to be something that gets in the
yeah.
way. So I appreciate
But I'm
your
sure you
optimism.
acknowledging that too is like so fruitful for them because they'll know it as well, you know? Like I felt like when I was a kid, you didn't really hear much about it. Like it was just fact. It was just
Hmm.
you'll always be under the man. You'll always have to do the women's work or whatever. And I think that we all kind of recognize it and it's in our faces, especially during a month like this month, you that will start to shift. I don't know, and we will make change. But yeah, I definitely my boyfriend would say the same thing that I'm certainly the optimist.
Yeah, well, and it's also funny you mentioned, just some of the roles, and I think you had mentioned some of the stereotypes that go with things. Like in our house, I feel the quote unquote stereotypical some of the women. Like I always tell my wife, don't iron, like I'll iron all the stuff, right?
Yeah,
Which is typically seen as what a woman should be doing, kind
yeah,
of in that
yeah,
household thing. But I'm like, I'll
yeah,
iron. I wash like clothes because I like to wash clothes a certain way. And I was like, I always say I think they come out better when I wash clothes, right? So
I'm sure
there are
she
some.
disagrees, but she'll just let you keep
Oh
watching.
yeah, yeah, and she's like, yeah, whatever, dude. You want to do the clothes? Go ahead and do the clothes. Um, but I want to transition into this. I know I asked you about your individual kind of role model, but um, another tough question: who would you put on like your Mount Rushmore of women? Right.
Mm.
So there's four there. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore? And I'm gonna limit a little bit, right? Not family members. Right. We'll go ahead and remove family members, but maybe big figures. Who would you put on your Mount Rushmore? I know
Oh,
that's a hard question, right? And I feel bad because I didn't like put it in like, hey, just be thinking about this because I just thought of it now in our
yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
So
I can. Okay, so I think someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg is someone who'd be up there just because of the strategy she had, long term vision for women. So someone like her. Um, and again, it's not even like necessarily agree or disagree or like political thing necessarily, but at the same time, it's what they accomplished and how they thought things through. Um, I would probably also say within my current realm, I mean, if I could give my mom like a little size of the Rushmore,
hey,
like,
yeah, we could
but
definitely do that. Yeah, we gotta love, gotta give mom love, gotta give mom
yeah,
love.
always. In HVS, I'd probably say one of my colleagues in our New York City office, Anne Lloyd Jones. She's been with the
Oh,
firm
that's
for
pretty
40
cool.
plus years and she's got a family. She's a great mom. She is an excellent consultant. She is the end all and be all to her clients. So I think someone like her is really admirable. I'd also put myself up there. I mean, like,
That's
why
what's
not?
up.
Right?
Right?
Like,
That's awesome.
I need to be up there because I need to be like forging the path, I guess, right? So I hold myself to a higher standard if I'm part of Mount Rushmore. A fourth person, oh man, can I pass? Can I get back to you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can definitely get back to me on that, and I'll ask this question while in the mean. And I know this will give you a chance to kind of look at the question I ask and maybe be able to be thinking about that still too. Um, what do you think people need to do more of uh, to help kind of promote women's movement, and not just in the celebration of International Women's Day or Women's History Month, but what do you think they can do to help celebrate women and help them move their initiatives forward?
Yeah, again, I think it's a little bit for me. Like, there's tons of groups or um, organizations that you can get a part of to help with your time, your money, so on and so forth. But I think for me, it's more like the little things, the everyday things, that lifting up your fellow female. I mean, we oftentimes are more stressed on ourselves, more imposter syndrome, more, it's a lot. And not to say that not everyone's dealing with a lot. I know men deal with plenty too, but I think that if we're going to be like comrades to one another, we kind of have to lift each other up. And for me, like, you have no idea how many times a week I delete the word sorry out of my emails. Like, I don't need to apologize for stuff. And I think just like passing that word on is like helpful to our young girls, our old girls. Like, everyone needs to realize that we don't need to be the note takers in a group assignment.
Oh my gosh, that happens every time.
Yeah.
Every time I say, hey, there needs to be a scribe, one of the women in the class ends up being the scribe.
Yeah.
Or one of my female colleagues ends up taking the notes there. And it blows my mind. Also, I got to call you out on this, right? Because the last email you sent me, I think you said sorry. Right. And so when you said that, and my thought was, she's busy. Why is she apologizing? Yeah. She's actually doing me a favor. Sorry to bother you again, Chelsey,
yep.
Right? So,
sorry for my late reply.
Yeah, I think that was what it said.
But you're supposed to say, like, thank you for your patience, or something like that. And it's tough. I mean, but literally those like little everyday things that you have to be doing to kind of balance the playing field, I think, are important. And obviously it's a struggle, and it's a everyday mental game of making sure that, you know, you're giving yourself the credit that we're giving yourself, or another female, another woman, the credit that they deserve. And even like within my team at work, you know, you have to lift people up. And if someone's done something just as well as someone else, like, they need to be recognized for it, things like that. Like, I don't know, we have to promote each other.
So now I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have that number 4?
Oh my gosh, you're not a good multitasker. Are women stereotypically good multitasking? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I don't know.
No. Gosh.
If you don't have a 4th, that's okay. You know what? That could be one of your trend-setting things. You're only going to chisel. Well, you chiseled 3 on there, right? So you just went with the 3, and that, I think that's totally okay. We'll just go with the 3. So, but I will say this. I like that you included yourself on the Mount Rushmore, and I'm going to go ahead and say this, and this is why. And all the time I've known you, I feel if my daughters grow up to be the 10th of the woman that I know you to be, I'll be probably one of the proudest dads on the face of the earth, because
I'm sure I probably would look up to your kids. That is so.
Thank you for saying. I just remember when I first met you, I was like, you know, she's something special. I know there's going to be a level of accomplishment there. And you just continue to do things that I think people recognize, and people are proud to be around you and be associated with you. And I am definitely one of those individuals. So if my daughters grow to be, like I said, a 10th of the woman that you are, actually a 10th of the person you are, I will be just such a proud dad. So thank you for.
That is so sweet. I mean, I'm very, very lucky to know. I mean, like, you've obviously had an impact on my life. The energy that you bring and brought to my classes and things like that it's huge. And I mean, we all learn from the people we're around, and I'm totally lucky to be blessed with the upbringing I had, the work experience I have, especially just from the women's side of things, but also just the challenging and nature that this industry brings. So it's been a lovely journey thus far.
Well, that is awesome. So the last piece I have here is called the Rant and Rave with Dave. This is where you get a chance to take about 60 seconds to just share your final thoughts on anything that you would like to share.
Oh, anything. I guess just since we're kind of like on the topic, I wish that everyone would just be like a tad more empathetic. And like focus on that and put time and energy into what is valuable to them. And that being like, if you don't like the news, you don't need to watch the news. If you don't like, I mean, you have to maybe go to work, and you have to maybe do something like the dishwasher, but like doing the things that bring you joy, and then being empathetic to yourself and others around you, as well as people you don't know. A lot of the comparison problems that we we face day in and day out through social media, through the news, through advertisements, through marketing. It's all really overwhelming. And I try and force myself, as well as want it on others, that we kind of take a step back and don't let it control us, and still find the good when everything's kind of imploding.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Chelsey, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated it. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Roll the Dice with Dave with Chelsey. I don't want to say your name.
Leffet.
Leffet. Chelsey Leffet. I've only been messing up her name for 14 years, right? So I do apologize about that. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You will be able to catch another episode coming soon of Roll the Dice with Dave. But please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Roll the Dice with Dave on both Facebook and YouTube. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day and continue to be the change, the positive change that you want to see in the world.